I'm now going to hand over back to Ellie Mae to introduce her second competitor, Millie, who will be discussing learning difficulties and disabilities and how we can implement support structures into education. So over to you, Ellie Mae.
Hello. So I would now like to introduce you to Millie. She has worked really hard on this presentation, like everyone else. But it's definitely something I think Millie will agree that it's spoken about, but I think it's actually quite shocking how many people this affects. And definitely really interesting. It's definitely made me think a lot more about the way that when I'm talking to young people or anyone really, how I approach that. So yeah, hello to Millie.
How can we help students with dyslexia succeed in education? If I was to ask you about dyslexia, could you tell me about it? Could you tell me what it is or how it affects people? The word dyslexia is from Greek and is made up of two different parts, dys, meaning bad or difficulty, and lexia, meaning word. So dyslexia literally means difficulty with words. In 2018, the NHS defined dyslexia as a common learning difficulty that can cause problems with reading, writing, and spelling. More recent research Made by Dyslexia in 2021 shows it can also affect a person's ability to concentrate and to memorise information. The condition is thought to be genetic and therefore passed on through families. So if your parents, grandparents, or siblings have it, there is a chance you may too. Some people can acquire it later in life from traumatic brain injuries. Research in an article of Reading Rockets suggests that dyslexic brains are non-neurotypical, meaning they're wired slightly differently. This means that dyslexic people have a different way of thinking and processing information. As I said before, dyslexia is a learning difficulty, which means it doesn't affect a person's intelligence. Instead, it makes them excellent at solving problems and puzzles and good at using their imagination. Have you ever wondered how many people have dyslexia? It's more common than you might think. NHS figures from 2018 suggest that 1 in 10 people in the UK will suffer from dyslexia, but other more recent research Made by Dyslexia suggests this figure could be as high as 1 in 5. I've been told there are approximately 50 people in this room. That means that 10 of us will have dyslexia. So how can we help students who may have dyslexia help their teachers and themselves to recognise it? Because in a school class, there are around 30 pupils. This means 6 of them may be suffering from dyslexia. We should educate teachers on the symptoms of dyslexia, such as reading and writing slowly, confusing letter order in words, poor and inconsistent spelling, understanding verbal explanations rather than written ones, finding sequences of directions hard to follow, but more positively, as I mentioned earlier, thinking in a more 3D way and having a better overview of problems. Even though most dyslexic people will display the symptoms I just listed, there are 4 main types of dyslexia. Phonological dyslexia, which is extreme difficulty reading as a result of a phonological impairment, which means they struggle to manipulate the basic sounds of language. Rapid naming deficit, which is difficulty quickly naming things such as numbers, letters, and colours on sight. It can also take a person longer to name things in a row. Double deficit, which is both rapid naming and phonological impairments that can cause reading problems. Individuals who suffer from this particular type of dyslexia are more prone to struggling. And finally, surface dyslexia, also known as visual dyslexia, which is difficulty with whole word recognition and spelling. Even people who suffer from the same type of dyslexia will have a unique set of challenges and strengths. For example, 9 in 10 people with dyslexia struggle with grammar and spelling, but are amazing writers. And 7 in 10 people really struggle to learn their times tables, but are brilliant at maths. Treatments differ between ages. Primary school children are more likely to get extra English lessons to improve their spelling and grammar, whereas secondary school pupils are more likely to get extra time on exams and assessments. This can help them complete their papers, but it can also cause problems such as embarrassment, low self-esteem, and lead them to be more self-conscious as they're being singled out from their peers. so this isn't always the best solution. Others use laptops and tablets instead of writing in class. This can be really helpful, especially when people are shown functions such as changing the background colour on text. This means that students can read information better. Students can also benefit from coloured books or overlays. The most common colours are blue and yellow. Sadly, around 80% of children will leave education without a diagnosis, making this a massive barrier for success not just in education, but for in the workplace. It also has a detrimental effect on a person's self-esteem. I can't stress enough how life-changing getting a diagnosis can be. I know someone who was told by their school that their dyslexia was just bad spelling. So when they got their diagnosis, it completely changed the world of education for them. We need to raise more awareness in schools, especially for teachers, so dyslexia for their pupils can be recognised more. So what can teachers and students do to help themselves or their pupils with possible or diagnosed dyslexia? Teachers, you should never ask someone with dyslexia to try harder. They already have to try so much harder than everyone else. Instead, adapt your teaching style to suit them. Using dyslexia-friendly fonts such as Comic Sans and Arial can help a dyslexic student read information on PowerPoints better. Using single-colour backgrounds rather than pictures and patterns, as this can help them to focus on the information needed. Spacing out information can also make it easier for reading. If needed, print out worksheets in the colour they were given on their colour screening. You can also talk to the school's special educational needs coordinator to try and arrange a test if you suspect a student may be suffering from dyslexia. Students, you can find a coping strategy that works for you. You should view your dyslexia as a superpower rather than a barrier. Be open with your friends, family and teachers because it's okay to admit that you're struggling. And you have positives, not just challenges, so embrace them and work around the problems. We should all encourage anyone we know who may be suffering from dyslexia to get a test. Although private tests do cost around £500, they can be life-changing. Although they aren't cheap for schools either, as the money has to come from their own budget, they can buy packages which allow them to test a certain amount of students per year. This is helping to make tests more accessible for those who can't afford them. Schools can also perform initial screenings to see if someone may have dyslexia. The screenings cover a variety of topics, such as reading, writing, spelling, and maths, to test for all the different types of dyslexia I mentioned earlier. We can also do colour screenings, which help reduce visual stress. These reduce visual symptoms such as letters moving around or words shuffling on the page. An article in the Brain Sciences Journal in 2021 suggests that the most effective coloured overlays are turquoise and yellow, as these can help reduce the amount of time dyslexic readers spend on individual words and sentences. We should also promote the use of role models, so dyslexic sufferers know they aren't alone. 3 famous dyslexics include Albert Einstein, one of the world's greatest scientists, Jamie Oliver, a chef, cookbook author and restaurateur, Holly Willoughby, a TV presenter, model and author. These are only a few of the dyslexic celebrities. There are so many more, such as Keira Knightley, Orlando Bloom, and Her Royal Highness Princess Beatrice. So could you tell me more about dyslexia now? I hope you could. And if you're ever struggling, think about what Joe Malone once said. My dyslexia is not a disability, but an ability to think differently. And if the world needs anything at this moment, it's people who think differently.